We're a little behind, so.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Barbara Frank, and I'm here to introduce Amanda Ferranti.
Hello.
She's the director and founder of Ferranti and Empowerment, harnessing sports psychology methods for professional development. Presentation of the methods used in sports psychology with the objective of inspiring women to acknowledge and overcome gender-related obstacles in their pursuit of professional goals. Thank you.
Okay. Hello, everyone. Hi. All right, thanks for coming today. In a quick half hour, I'm going to try to present the nuts and bolts of sports psychology, just to give you a little bit of background of what I do on a daily basis. I primarily work with kids, so everything I present to you is with my work with them and also from personal experience. I went to Princeton University and played soccer there, and then I followed that with a semi-pro career. And while I was playing, I studied sports psychology, so I really developed my program from personal athletic experience. And then I got a master's and a certification by the Association of Applied Sports Psychology, which I'm one of only 2 people on Long Island, and Dr. Bowman, who I think might work here, is the only other certified consultant on Long Island. So then I opened a business, or I did that at the same time, to go into private practice, and I've published, and I've just built my business. So now all the sports psychology worksheets and methods that I use, I'm applying to business development because I no longer compete at a high level. But I have a workbook that I use for myself that I give to kids. It's all about goal setting for my career and my business development. So I thought that this was an interesting opportunity because it's exactly what I do. So I'm going to try to go quickly or briefly into some of the methods I use, all right? Then I'm going to explore, because it's a women's symposium, I wanted to explore some gender-related obstacles and hear from all of you and what you experience, and maybe share some of the things that I experience, and then provide a couple of brief strategies that you can take home with you, right? Systematic progress. That's kind of how I look at sports psychology. Everything in my mind is very organized, right? So we talk about goal setting. Everything comes down to a goal. What is it that you want to achieve, right? That could be the ultimate goal, like the dream outcome goal. For me, I want a facility. Then it's the performance goals. Okay, well, I want to speak more. I want to speak, in front of people. I want to work on my marketing skills and my networking. And then you have the daily, day-to-day goals. Like, all right, well, this is what I'm going to do today in order to get to my goal. Right, so you have the outcome, the performance, and the process. That's how it's laid out. And then when you go to the process goals, you decide what it is you want to do, but then you have to take the next step and identify what the obstacles are that stand in your way. And this is often the missing piece. People set goals, but they're not figuring out, well, why have I not yet achieved that? It took me years to make phone calls. And I'm a counselor, so I'm not pushy, I'm not that aggressive, I'm not a salesperson. So it took me a while to figure out, why am I not getting on the phone and calling these people? And I really had to explore the obstacles. And in sports psychology, the obstacles that we're primarily concerned with are your fears and doubts. What are the thoughts and what are the emotions that are kind of standing in your way from getting where you need to go? And the more I explore that, the more progress I feel and I find, right? So we want to look today at what are some of the obstacles that you feel women face in the workplace. And I do invite you to share, if anyone has thoughts, what are some women or gender-related obstacles that you might experience? And I'm not positive what everyone's line of work is, but age. I agree. How old do I look? Okay, so works many ways, right? People think I'm in college, right? And I know it is now. And I finally, through the years of doing this, I'm like, whatever. I know who I am. I know how old I am, I know how intelligent I am and experienced I am, so getting over that obstacle of age. Anything else? Yes?
I think it's the men tend to take over all the conversations in the meetings, committees.
Yeah.
The women tend to pull back a little bit.
So this is really important, and the main piece I want to explore is really just, it's just the human nature of men versus women. We are kind of different species. Our brains are slightly different. So the natural tendency for males and the natural tendencies for females kind of could put us at a disadvantage. It doesn't have to, but we need to be able to look at that, without a bias or without a judgment, and work with it. Use it as a strength. So a lot of times when I'm working with kids, yeah.
Sorry to interrupt you. Are you sure it's really the brain and not the cultural?
Oh, I'm sure, yeah.
So the way we're getting brought up.
And don't take this as I'm saying like that's exactly what it is, but yes, there are, our structures are insula, they are different sizes, so there are some brain difference. There's definitely cultural difference that exacerbate that. It's a whole mix of things, but in and of itself, like, we are slightly different. We are not the same species, right? So as a female, we have to acknowledge, and we have to acknowledge the culture issues or differences.
The way we're brought up is different.
Yeah.
Obviously, that the brain is different.
Yeah.
So it's documented.
Okay, yeah, and there's some studies that definitely show. Daniel Goleman is the #1 on this, that I get a lot of my research from. So just showing just some small differences, and it's not like always women, always male. We live on a spectrum, and I think we're becoming more comfortable with that. As society develops, we are realizing that it's not just black and white. And that's sometimes the problem we run into, is that black and white style of thinking, and I talk to my clients about that all the time. It's a spectrum, but I encourage you to look within and acknowledge what is personal to you. So today we'll just share, but everything I talk about is individual based. So sports psychology, when you're working with somebody, you're going into the brain of that performer. You can't just say, well, this is what your obstacles are. Oh, I'm afraid of making mistakes. So mostly every client comes to me with that issue. I'm afraid of making mistakes. Do you think I treat every client the same? Absolutely not. So we have to go into, why is the mistake a hurdle for that person? And so basically we're saying, like, what are some ideas of mistakes? What are some ideas of the obstacles that you may face in the workplace? My brain is different than yours, right? So, and I know I don't struggle with that. If a male's speaking over me, I'm going to speak right back. I'm going to argue back. And so our issues are different. I think for me, it's that empathy, right? I have this natural tendency to empathize, and I'm very sensitive with my emotions. So I feel like until I recognize that, I couldn't harness it. Because I was like, I felt that aggressiveness, or I felt like I was being, mistreated or undervalued. And until I can see the emotions that were being triggered inside of me, I couldn't do anything about it. Right? So I gained my power through recognizing what are my obstacles. And your obstacles don't have to be gender-related at all. I wrote some down here. There's just... it could be as simple as your own upbringing, like you just said. It could be, how you were raised, and I'm not comfortable speaking out. I'm not comfortable making sales calls. That has nothing to do with gender. The point is to identify, make a list. We write things down, we organize, and we see it out there. I have everything written here. That's why I gave you worksheets, to give you an idea. Organize what's going on inside of your mind, and that's the tenets of sports psychology. And once we can establish them, then we develop action plans to work through them. And a lot of those action plans are psychologically based. It could be self-talk, it could be imagery, it could be deep breathing, right? I'm not going to go into all of them today, but, gender-related obstacles. So that was the idea, right? So there could be whatever it is going on for you, this inequality, and it really depends on the field you're in. I'm in a male-dominated field, right? Whatever you're working in might be more prominent for you. For me, yeah, it's all men. And some of the biggest issues that I deal with are being hit on. constantly, and getting phone calls and getting meetings and realizing that it's for the wrong reasons. And then I want to be aware of that, gracefully retreat from that, and say, okay, different path for me. And it can be very frustrating, and it can be really disappointing, but instead of allowing that to shut me down and lose hope that I can advance to maybe work with a professional team, I just kind of take a deep breath, recognize what's going on, and move along from there. So this is the second part of it, is that internal awareness. With sports psychology, athletes are body conscious people. We feel everything. We like to move. Most of my journey has been physically based, and I try to teach athletes, it's more of an educational process, what's going on inside of your body, how that connects with how you're feeling and what you're thinking, and then how those feelings and thoughts affect your performance. So if you're not in a performance sport-related environment, it still doesn't matter because your brain is going to be impacted too. So if you're having a boost in adrenaline, you're going to have more rapid thoughts, or you're going to get maybe shaky and you're not going to be able to perform as much. You're not going to be able to think as clearly as you would if you were in a calm state. So the education process, understand that your mind and your body are connected and that your emotions put you into a different physiological state. Yes?
I think what you're also talking about too is projection.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, if you're sort of ruminating and thinking that, whether it's a sport or performance related thing or a meeting or a presentation you have to give, and if you're sort of internalizing that negativity and that anxiety and that
Yes.
frustration, that might inadvertently come out in whatever it is that you're doing, and it might affect the overall quality
It definitely will,
of
yeah.
whatever it is that you're doing. So it's sort of a projection, and if you're kind of putting that out there, it might end up going into your accomplishment of
Absolutely.
whatever it is without you even really intending for that to happen.
Yeah, and this is where I guess I bring in a little spiritual part. Is just whatever's going inside of you is what is being identified from whomever you're speaking with, or whatever meeting you're in. So the idea is to teach athletes to really look within themselves and kind of identify what's going on without judgment. Try to hear the thoughts that are going through your mind. Write it down. See it in front of you. Understand the emotion that you're experiencing with it, and go from there. And we come up with strategies. So if you look at the bottom of this emotional management strategy, these are kind of our 3 steps. I'm not going to go into detail into them today, but we encourage the athletes to figure out what your triggers are. Everyone is different. And again, like I said, some people can really recognize their thoughts. Some people can really recognize a change in emotional state. And some people can really recognize changes in physiological state. So we try to figure out, okay, what makes most sense to me? I personally recognize my thoughts. And I'm starting to learn to recognize a change in my physiological state. We're using those as signs. Use your body as a tool. So awareness really is the key point here. What is going on inside of my body? And start to, over time, recognize what the triggers are so that you can be prepared. If we're going into a big match, right? You look back here, there's one of my clients, a junior tennis player competing in the U.S. Open for her first time. We just talked about what are your triggers. What can you prepare for and know might set you off in this environment? And once we have that written down, we can come up with a plan on how to handle it. Right? So she was able to calm herself, this is her method, to play with her strings there, to refocus, to take a deep breath, and have trigger words or cue words that can set her back on course. But you can't get to that point unless you know what's triggering you. Right? So today's whole theme was to really hopefully get everyone in this room to think, what are my triggers? And if I haven't thought about it, start to think of it from here moving forward. And so I wanted to invite you to maybe either share or start writing down for yourself. And I think maybe sharing might help encourage people to think, what are some of your triggers in the work environment? Yes?
It really irritates me when
That's really great. So if you hear any, if you hear,
Punch them in the face, but I don't
yes.
do that. So tell me how to work this through.
That's awesome. Well, the starting point is you know that that's a trigger. And at the same time, if you look at the worksheet, you're going to list all the emotions that you feel when you face that trigger. From there, you come up with a plan on how to handle those emotions, how to manage them. The 3-step process, it takes time to go into depth of that. I don't have enough time here. But the first step is to take that deep breath. Because physiologically, your state has been changed. You know it's a trigger. And you can almost, there's certain people you might expect are going to say those things. So I've realized that too. It's like, I'm going to encounter this person on a daily basis or maybe on a weekly basis. I can expect that this trigger is going to happen. I know the exact emotion that I'm going to feel. Let me come up with a plan that works for me and try to understand. And my first step is really to accept the reality. And so we're all adults here, and sometimes with the kids that's hard to hit them with, but you got to accept what's happening. Accept what's happening without judgment. Know that you're you. He's him. He's going to do that. Can't control him. So it's a lot about the controllables. I can't control what comes out of his mouth. I can't control his frame of mind, but what I can control is how I respond to it, right? And doing that work at home would help you a lot better. If you ever, I don't know what's coming to my mind, if you're ever having an argument with someone and you try to bring up points, it's never good in that moment. Your points aren't really being heard because they're being clouded by that state of anger. In your case, anger, or it could be anxiety or disappointment or discouragement. So going home and kind of thinking it through and thinking, this would be the way that I could handle it next time would really help you manage the emotions and understand them a little bit. And this is about you progressing, not changing him, right? And that's kind of the way we work in sports psychology. We got a lot of complaints about coaches or maybe other teammates. I don't even work with the parents. I work with the kids. We're not trying to change these people around us. We're trying to change the process that goes on inside of us so that we can live a better, more fulfilling life. And like you said, and put that out into the world. And it's amazing to see what comes back. And I feel like I'm very passionate about this because I feel like living proof of that. I went through depression. I've had a hard time. I've had 2 ACL surgeries. I've had hard coaches. And through it all, and I've established a business, I've been able to be okay with myself inside. And it's amazing to see the phone calls now, the opportunities I'm getting. I'm like, this is amazing. It works. So, there's a lot to be said about really doing the work at home, and the work is to sit there, really look within yourself honestly, and come up with plans. Well, that's my way of doing it. Any other triggers? Yes.
Perceiving the other person as either not understanding or not interested or not paying. I can read the room and sometimes inaccurately, but then suddenly the recording starts going in my head.
Yes.
This isn't working, and then I can't, it colonizes my brain and I can no longer, I don't manage to find my way through because I'm assuming a negative reaction.
Absolutely. Right. So that's changing your emotional physiological state. The brain kind of shut down a little bit. So coming up with a plan, really looking at that at home and coming up with a plan could help you in the future, because I've experienced that as well, and I'm sure other people in the room have experienced this. If someone's not listening or disinterested, oh my God, am I right? Do I sound like an idiot right now? Is it what I'm saying working? And that could happen with workshops. I think that happened when I first started doing this. I'm like, oh my God. And it goes into complete shutdown mode. Yeah. And this is happening to kids a lot now. Shut down. I just call it shutdown mode, where computers, shut off. Right, and they need plans and strategies, and we'll get to that in the second part. Did you have another one?
Oh, no, I was just really going to tack on to that.
Okay.
So similar to what you were saying, I think a trigger could be also, regardless of gender, just the perception of not feeling respected in what you're saying. So So not necessarily someone agreeing
Okay.
with you or doing what you think they should do, but not respecting your job and your role as, you know, I'm supposed to be advising you or giving you this
Yep.
information and recommending certain things, and when people just don't listen or don't take that into account or do what they want anyway, that's a huge trigger. 'Cause
Absolutely.
It just feels like, why am I doing my job?
Yes.
You know?
Yeah, absolutely. I think I've experienced that too. And like when so my main trigger lately has been kind of being hit on instead of, so I feel like I'm not being respected in terms of my intellect and my capabilities to work with athletes. And I don't shut down anymore because I know how to handle it. And I'm like, oh, okay, you know, we're going there again. Yes.
You know, building on that gender thing, one thing that I find is I work with a group, it's all men and myself, and when I come into a meeting, they all shake hands and they kiss me below.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
It's annoying.
Yeah.
Because it puts me in a certain place that I'm the girl.
Okay.
And ask me about my kids or something. And this kind of leaning and saying hello. I know it's meant in a nice way, and we've known
Yeah.
each other a while, but no one else is getting kissed while everyone else is getting a handshake.
Yeah.
So it places you in a certain perception right away.
It's so true. Something. Well, I was going to add to that. That's an interesting moment too, where maybe in the action plan you do have a bit of control, right? Maybe recognizing it and at least knowing what's going on inside of you on an emotional level, quickly managing that, and then communicating something. And that communication can be done in a funny way, you know, a joking way or a little sarcasm. I don't know, you know, whatever fits your personality. But, you know, the action plan isn't always within yourself. It could be communicating, saying something like, hey, you know, like that, it bothers me. You know, it depends how much, yeah, exactly. Or put your hand out, yeah. The handshake, lean in, kiss, that's amazing. Yeah.
But it's sort of
Yeah.
it's also you know, perception then.
Yeah.
Like the unconscious bias, you know,
It,
where it's not meant in a negative way.
No, it's
but
not.
They don't, you know, realize that it's demeaning.
yeah. I think in this regard, it's knowing within yourself, you know, finding that compassion, like they don't mean to do that. And then it completely shifts your emotional response to it, because what matters most is that you perform in that meeting, right? And that's the idea, is saying, okay, there's just some things you have to let go of, you know, and are we fighting a bigger fight? It depends what you want to do. And if you're fighting a bigger fight, yeah.
So they're coming
Yeah, that's true.
I
There you go.
understand it. It comes from
Yeah,
culture.
yeah.
You know, when they kind of came up in business. I don't know, it's, yeah, you know, I understand it, but it's,
But part of it's speaking up, right? But then there's also the bias against the woman that speaks up. So you want to address it and you want to communicate it so that they know you're not comfortable with it and you don't want that. But then you're seen as like the complainer, you know, which is the other obstacle.
I think what matters here is that you don't care if they perceive you as a complainer, because you have the right to speak up.
Yeah, and I think maybe the way you present it,
Yeah.
the way you present the conversation, I think, you know, with the humor in a case like this, but there's probably bigger issues going on. If it's just the handshake, is it representing more within the office? And so when we look at our triggers, it's important to consider all of them, and then the next step I would take is to find a theme. All right, so if you really, really sit there and go through all the possible triggers, look for the theme in them. And the theme is going to tell you a lot about yourself. And that's probably rooted from upbringing. You know, in sports psychology, we don't go into that, but it's just really identifying these surface triggers and then thinking, oh, I see. It's when I'm not being respected, or when I feel like I'm not being respected. It's feeling when I feel like I'm being belittled in a way. And then to recognize that and pick your fights or pick your conversations based on that, and fix that within yourself, or work on it, not fix. It's just work on that within yourself again so that you can perform. Okay. Yes.
I'm really wondering if instead of placing ourselves in the position of, I don't like it, why is this happening? And so fact that maybe we are the one and only in the room, and the men come and kiss us, is opening another communication path.
Yeah.
And the thing is that if we are aware of that, this can be useful. So it really puts us, if we are aware of that and comfortable with that, and self-aware of that, and confident, well, maybe we can really have this other meaning, another way of communicating. It's another way of networking that normally we women are not really very good at.
Yeah.
But if this is an opening, we could use it. Could use it in a positive manner rather than closing in and saying, no, I don't like it. Why is he kissing me? Not kissing everybody else.
Yeah.
So I think we should really probably learn this self-awareness, looking inside, to strengthen on that. Because I think it can be a source of power rather than being a source of weakness.
Okay. And that's what I was going to say is we look at what happens and we look at the triggers and we try to figure out how to turn this into a power, a source of power. So one of my biggest strengths and I guess hurdles would be my level of sensitivity. So I feel emotions very quickly and very deeply, and a lot of my clients feel the same way, which is probably why they've come to my door, right? So look at these emotions and think, okay, how can I harness this as an advantage? And I thought about that point coming into this meeting is, how can I harness my role as a female, or my gender? How can I harness that as an advantage? So you might have a person in the same situation, and maybe myself actually, because I'm a hugger and a kisser. I'm Italian. So it has nothing to do with being a female. I do this with all of my friends and my colleagues. I don't let them leave a room without a hug, right? And I do this consistently, and that has nothing to do with being a female. It just has to do with being me. And so it just shows us that the difference is in your perception and what you put in the forefront of your mind. So understanding our triggers and understanding our obstacles allows us to look at what's going on in the forefront of our mind and work on it and decide, okay, am I making this into something? Am I causing my own emotions? And do I like the emotions that I'm feeling? Are they helping me or hurting me? And that's a phrase we use often, because I'm not going to tell anyone there's no right or wrong. I don't know. So when I speak with someone, I'm like, well, is that helping you or hurting you? And if you tell me that it's hurting you, then let's work on it. Let's write it down and look into it a little bit deeper, because it's not helping. Right? And I think the other point that I just remember that when you're playing sports, everything is happening very fast. Okay? So athletes, you give them credit. In the workplace, we might have a little bit more time to reflect and work on it. Now that could be an advantage or a disadvantage. I don't really know. In sports, we don't have time to think, so we go, and this conscious process has to be slowed down in an office setting, all right, because they just don't have the time to work through it. You don't have time to deep breathe in the middle of a soccer game. You just don't, right? So think of that, think of what's going on, use your strengths, find your power. It's kind of getting to this next point of what to do about it. So again, I couldn't get into too much of the emotional management, but at least these 2 points are so simple. My 9-year-olds do them. I work with kids as young as 8 and 9 years old, and they're very powerful. It's as simple as coming up with a list of your character traits that you feel firmly connected with and that you can call upon whenever these moments are happening. So again, if you're in that, so your example here, if you're in that moment where all of a sudden you recognize this physiological change and you, oh my God, they're not respecting me, they're not listening, I'm feeling anxious right now, my brain is shutting down, boom, I know I'm intelligent, I know I'm creative, I know my stuff, I'm organized. Well, these are my words, these are some of my words I guess I came up with for presenting. Like if anything went wrong here, I'd be like, oh, I'm creative, I know this, I'm passionate, I'm very organized. And I have a list of words ready for me depending upon the situation that can help me boost my sense of pride and my confidence. It's really simple, right? And how much do you identify with these traits is very important. So sitting there, really, really exploring the possibilities of some words. So, and I also invite you to kind of write some of the words that you feel about yourself that you know are true. You know, take a moment. I say the magic number is 3, at least 3, that can help you as a quick fix when you need it the most. You know, and since we're, you know, kind of opening up too, if anyone has a comment on this, has anyone ever tried to use this method? Does anyone have a list of character traits that they use? No. No. Yes. Yeah. Well, it seems like you do. Yeah. That's good.
Sorry, I'm not sure it works.
What's that?
So if you are in a situation where someone is not respecting you,
Mm-hmm.
and maybe you are in a meeting or you are talking to someone, and you really feel that they are not respecting you, repeating to yourself how good you are, I'm not sure it works. Maybe the only thing is try to really remember and recognize situation where someone else were recognizing what you are. Because you are in a situation where
Boom.
it's really
Next.
yourself outside.
Yeah.
So what you need is really to remember that someone recognizes your values. You might know your values, but unfortunately it's not working in this way because your values, even if they are there, they are not really helping the others to recognize it.
Okay, so in this case, and back to everything I've said, it follows suit, is that you can only control yourself and how you feel. The point in this moment is to manage your emotion. They've already triggered you into a change in physiological state. That's already happened. Yes, this takes time, and if you keep working on these things, you won't even be triggered into that physiological state. But in that moment, what's your option? You need to recover quickly. So that's what we're saying, like in sports and athletics, you're in that moment, you need to recover quickly. You know, you've just got screamed at by your coach and you need to get back out there and perform. Well, I'm not going to get my coach to love me and say good job right there. I'm probably and I can't rely on my teammates. I can't depend on them. That would be great if they supported me in that moment, but the most dependable, reliable thing is to talk to yourself. You know, talk to yourself in a way that works, right? And this is one of the things that works because these are, you believe these. If I came up with a word that I didn't really believe about myself, it's not going to work. You know, it's definitely not going to work. And we're just talking, these are not lies. This is getting you to the point, again, where you can trust yourself. You know, that is the whole point. I am going to be at my best self. I'm going to perform my best when I'm trusting myself, right? So, you know, kind of what happened there is you're triggering into like a more logical, rational brain. You've got to kind of calm down a little bit and get back to that intuition and that trust. So this is one of the key ways that I've been able to shift back to that point, all right? Step 1, obviously, is that breathe and accept and acknowledge what's going on, and then boost your self-esteem. But to your point, that is the next step. I mean, this is multifaceted. This is not just like, oh, boom, I'm just going to do that. And sometimes the character traits work better for some people than the other. The well is the other concept, and it's exactly what you're saying is remember a time from your memory, you know, go into your memory, use it as an advantage. What do we tend to remember? What do athletes tend to remember? Every little mistake they made in that competition. It is just, every single client I've had in my 8 years of doing this has said, yeah, you know, I just always remember the mistakes when we come off. And I get it, you know, you're trying to fix, you're trying to progress. But can we balance that before we try to fix and progress? Can we balance that with some memory of success? It's a balancing game, right? If I notice that, you know, I'm in a state of disappointment or anxiety or anger, I might need a little boost to shift me back, to calm me down. And the way to do that is a reminder, something that we know produces feelings of confidence and feelings of pride or feelings of peace. For me, this makes me feel at peace, right? So we're just balancing those emotions. Remember, this is not, like right now I'm in a normal state. I don't need to list off my character traits right now. You know, I'm good. And if I did that, I might go into like egotistical land, right? So it's just knowing, having a tool on hand when you need it the most. And when are you going to need it the most? When you're triggered, when your triggers get set off. Yes?
I think I like what you're saying a lot, because I think the base kind of foundational concept that it works with is that whether we know it or not, the majority of us, and maybe women more than men, I'm not 100% sure factually how it falls, but we all sort of base these characteristics on what we perceive other people think of us, or what we've been told about ourselves, and coming up with 3 or 4 words about yourself that you intrinsically truly believe about yourself is not easy. Most people, when, like, let's say I've started to do this with other people or with myself, you always kind of come up with the things that you sort of know about yourself because of maybe you know that from your peers or your classmates or your partner or whatever the case may be. And when you actually start digging into, is this something I really think about myself? Is this something that I feel I know about myself? And I think that's why what you're saying is really important, because that's not easy to come up with words. There might be words or things that you feel about yourself that maybe other people might not agree with. Like, I may consider myself an introvert, but I might be very outgoing and very social and very friendly, and networking is my job, but that's what I think about myself. That's how I feel. So I think, I think what you're saying has a lot of really good, you can thread it through a lot of things in general, because it's so universal.
Great, thank you. And it reminds me, working with kids is amazing, because they really tell you what's going on. They remind you of what it was like when you were their age. And I always talk about those character traits, and I ask, and I'm like, do you know what the younger ones, do you know what character traits are? Where have you learned them? How have they been presented to you? And the girl, one of my clients last week said, well, we just talk about them, in other people, or we just talk about them as things. They've never been encouraged to reflect on traits within themselves. And I'm like, oh, well, that doesn't make sense.
I coach, and and we ask that on a self-profile of little kids, especially girls, and that's the one question they cannot answer. How would your friends describe you? What kind of person are you? And they leave that all blank. And I'm like, so it was very eye-opening when I did that with them. Just recently.
And so we're doing it over time, and there's like, oh, I don't know. And then some kids nail them out. They know, but it has had a profound effect, because I've said, I'm like, did you remember your character list? And there's some more anxious, maybe older athletes who are in more state of anxiety, and they really can't remember their character list. And so, as simple as this activity is, every week I have to go, hey, what do you think stopped you from really thinking about your character list? There's a block there. And then diving into that, it's like, all right, why can I not tell myself or remind myself of these traits when I can have a conversation with Coach Amanda and be firmly connected to them? Like, I know, I can say, yes, I'm like, do you agree with that? Do you agree that that's who you are, those traits? Yes, 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 yes. But you're having a hard time using it in the moment. So, why do I think it is? I think there's, right now in society, that's a big question. I think there's a big disconnect from kids just really knowing who they are. I think social media has a lot to do with it, and the way they're kind of evolving. And they are depending upon they're getting a lot of information coming at them. They're getting a lot of opinions coming at them. They're caring a lot about what other people think, likes, all that. Boy and girls. This was a boy I was talking about, this anxiety one. This was a boy, a 16-year-old boy. Yeah, I really don't see much gender differences in terms of the mentality. There's a disconnect from what's going on inside of themselves, and I worry a little bit to see, like, all right, what's going to happen with this generation? I'm very grateful for the job that I can offer, because people are coming to me through their sport, which is amazing, and they can understand their sport, and they get it, and they like to write things down, and they like the process behind it. So it's not just counseling. It's not like we're sitting there just kind of talking, and they can relate it to whatever sport they're playing. Right, so, yes, that's what I think. Yeah, I personally, that's been a lot of what I've been reading about and going into, and I really do feel like it, because, like you said, our brains, we evolve over time, and you're at the most impressionable times of your life. at that age, and you're looking at a screen. I mean, I looked at a screen yesterday for over an hour, and I was like, oh, yeah. Like, I can't do this anymore. So they're looking at a screen every day, and that screen has a lot to do with socializing. My screen, I'm doing work. It's a little different. So you're now judging yourself, and this is maybe why I said that too. You're judging yourself based on others, or you want that feedback from others. Let's make sure that we're fully connected with ourselves. We know our triggers. I'm kind of summarizing that, and this is all my information. Know your triggers. Know the emotions the emotional states that you have a tendency to go into. Be able to recognize that and come up with at least a strategy to progress. And part of your strategy, I encourage you to use your well and to use the character traits that can be used in every trigger, every moment. I don't know if you have time for questions, but we kind of took we took questions as we went. If you have any questions, feel free to email or call. And my blog, I do write a lot about this kind of stuff. If you want to hear more continued dialogue, I enjoy writing. So thank you. Thanks for listening.